Hi everyone, this is David Kessler. If you're just tuning in, welcome. We're doing a Facebook Live today talking about the unexpected feelings that we deal with when death unfortunately happens in our life. So I'll give folks just a couple of more minutes to come on as we're getting ready here. Let me know when you're on, where you're from, say hello, and I'll be taking some questions in just a few minutes. I have quite a few here, but I'll give people just a moment to continue to sign on. And I know many of you will watch this in the replay, so just know it'll also be available later for you. All right, so as you may know me from my work, decades of working with people in grief. I also have had to deal with grief personally. You may know me from my books with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross or Louise Hay on dealing with loss. So I wanted to talk today about the unexpected feelings we may have about death. The first thing I want to say is the death itself may have been unexpected. So that's one of the first things when we talk about unexpected feelings, people go, David, even the death was unexpected. I see some people are tuning in. Hi, Diane. Hi, Debbie. I'm glad you're with us. So we are forced into a world we may not be prepared for. And when we're forced into the world and we're dealing with death, a lot of unexpected feelings may come up. One of the ones that often takes people back is guilt. So I want to first talk about guilt for just a couple of minutes. Guilt is very normal. When someone dies, we always are left wanting more. No matter what age they are. Of course, I've been with people who have had loved ones who are young die, and they want more. But I also deal with people who their mother or father died in their 90s or at 100, and they were left wanting more. And that feeling of wanting more often, it relates to maybe we didn't do it as well as we could of at the end. And we feel guilt about it. So when we feel guilt, we may say things like, if only I would have known it was their last year. If only I would have known it was their last day, I would have done it different. And we feel guilty about how we did that last period. And some of you may feel guilty because of something that happened at the end. Maybe you were in an argument with the person. So let me tell you how I can help with that. First thing I want you to think about is you must understand you were having a normal experience when an abnormal thing happened. So for example, disagreements are normal in life. We have disagreements with people. However, them dying is not normal. So let me repeat that. I want to make sure you get that. You were doing a normal thing. You were busy, you were focused on other things, you may have been in the middle of a disagreement, which was normal, but then they died. And so you were left doing a normal thing before an abnormal experience happened. So we look back and we go, I can't believe I was arguing with them the day before they died. I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I wasn't there. And just know this is so normal to feel this way. And we all feel that way. I can tell you the last time I saw my younger son, we had some casual time together, but I would have done it so differently had I known it was the last time I'd be seeing him. And so what we have to remember at that point is I can't go back and beat myself up for not knowing it was the last day. I didn't know, and I have to find compassion for myself. So if you can find compassion, that often helps by realizing you were doing a normal thing before the death happened. And so there you are feeling all this pain, and we want to release that guilt, forgiving ourselves, self-compassion. I always say to people, your loved one died. Haven't you suffered enough? Now, if you did do something that you truly regret, find a quiet place, Go to the cemetery, be with their ashes, just go to a spot where you feel peaceful and apologize to them. I always believe if you sincerely say it in your heart, they will hear it in theirs. So say it in your heart to them. I believe they still hear. If you were in an estranged family, I'm sure in the back of your mind, you're always thought someday we'll have a chance to work it out. But death robs us of that chance. And I wrote a book with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross called Life Lessons. And we talked about when something horrible like estrangement happens and you are left feeling terrible when they died, you can still go back and apologize, and you can also do what's called a living amends. A living amends is where you said, I was estranged from that family member and they died. Let me recognize, let me do a living amends for the rest of my life. I want to work things out with family members. I will never have an estranged relationship again. And that commitment to never having a strange relationship again is your living amendment, your living apology to the person who died. So if you never got a chance to tell them you love them, or you didn't say it on their last day, tell them now. Or do a living amends by saying, for the rest of my life, I am always going to apologize in time, to say I love you to people in time. Another issue that comes up is survivor's guilt. It's that feeling of, I should have died and not them. And when people ask me this, I always say, tell me why. And they say, because their life was precious, because they had more to do, because they had a purpose. And I always say, don't you have a purpose? Don't you have more to do? If their life was precious, isn't yours? If you're not sure what your purpose is, can you just be willing to wait for it to be revealed to you? And just trust that it will be revealed in time, but love them. You can still love them, and you can live a life that honors them. And their life may be gone, but that doesn't mean they would ever want you to waste yours. We're talking, if you're just tuning in, about unexpected feelings after a death. By the way, I have a whole nother lecture at aboutgrief.com if after this program you want even more information. It's a 15-minute video. So if you're tuning in, we're talking about the unexpected feelings. You may also have what we call secondary losses. Maybe you have the loss of your in-laws, the loss of your family, the loss of that social network, the people you were connected to by being connected to your loved one. So just know we often have to grieve those secondary losses, and that's also very normal. So let me take some questions that were posted earlier on the Facebook, and then if you have any questions, I'd love to take yours. Linda writes in, she said, I lost my mom June 16th this year. The funeral was not until the 13th. I keep having nightmares of her waking up in the coffin and being on her own. I did not get on with my father, so my mom was the only parent I really had. What can I do? So sorry, Linda. So the first thing I would tell you is your mom is not in that coffin anymore. I don't know what your beliefs are, but I believe the body she used is in that casket. The clothes she used to wear is in that casket, but I don't believe your mom is there. So I would just picture where you believe your mom is. Is she in heaven? Does she live on in your heart? But we have control over your thinking. And if that image comes up of her in the casket, just go, Mom, that's not where you are. You're in my heart. Or Mom, you're in heaven. But it's her body and it's her clothes that are in the casket, not the love, the spirit you had within you. Hope that helps, Linda. Christine asks, it will be 2 years on the 25th of this month since my husband passed away. My 3 children, ages 18, 20, and 22, are already feeling sad and edgy about that day. We're planning on a possible going out camping overnight for the weekend. My question is the guilt I feel because I want to stay home that day and I don't want to run away. But it was a very traumatizing day. My husband died in his sleep, so my daughters and I remember that day, and we sort of feel a PTSD. I don't want to teach my children to run away from what they're feeling. I know we can't. But is it okay for us to be out of the house and making new memories is a better option? Yes, you can absolutely leave the house that day. And I would reframe what you're thinking. I would not think about, oh, we're running from the feelings, because like you said, you know you can't. I would reframe it for you and for your kids. We are going to go on a camping trip, and we're going to do it in honor of your dad. This is in honor of him. And the other thing I want to just share with you is when we're in somewhere like our home, we have our grief, but we are constantly triggered by things. We're constantly triggered by, that's the sofa they sat in, that's the kitchen they were in. When we go to a new place, we do not have the triggers. But you know what we do have? We have the pure grief that's in our heart. So the other way you could frame it for you and your kids is we're going to go to a place that's new to us, where we are away from the triggers in honor of Dad and your husband, but we're just going to feel the pure grief that's in our heart. And if during that trip we cry, that's okay. And if during that trip we laugh, that's okay, because your dad would want us to laugh again. I would frame it that way. I hope that helps a bit. Susan asks, what's your feelings or opinions on going to a medium or psychic? So I get this all the time. I often joke about, I deal with so many people who see mediums and psychics that if I ever had a chance, I would write the book, A Griever's Guide to Mediums, because it comes up in my world so much. People often ask, should people in grief go to a medium? And I go, first of all, let's take all the shoulds out of it. Don't should on anyone. And the reality is people who are grieving do go to mediums. So I would just tell you this. You want to choose reputable mediums. You want to choose mediums that come through a referral. You want to choose mediums who are fairly inexpensive. You should never have to go into your savings account for a medium. And a medium should not make you dependent on them. You don't need to keep going back and back. And go to a medium in a safe place. So for instance, this year I do 2 events where it's myself doing grief work, Paul Denniston doing body work, and Maureen Hancock is a medium I've worked with. It's in a safe setting. On the West Coast, it's at 1440.org in about a month. On the East Coast, it's at Kripalu in, I believe, November. So just know you want to go to a safe, controlled setting like that and deal with a reputable medium. So that's just my thoughts on it. And like I said, be very cautious about someone getting you dependent. You shouldn't need to do that. Hope that helps. All right, Kathy writes in, after the death of someone I love dearly who struggled with addiction, the unexpected surprise emotion I felt was relief. Kathy, it's just not you. People often feel relief after a death, and they find it very unexpected, and they feel like they're being disloyal. But you are feeling relief not from the person who died, but from the struggle that person was going with. So if they had a long illness, you're relieved that their struggle with cancer is over. You're relieved their struggle with Alzheimer's is over. And the same is true with addiction. The same is true with mental illness. Many times you have people who had a loved one who died from a mental illness. Maybe they died by suicide. They'll say, oh my gosh, I feel relieved that I'm not counting pills with them or getting them to the psychiatrist, or I feel relieved I don't have to check on them to see if they're going to their 12-step meetings. So just know feelings of relief are very common and normal, and you're relieved the struggle is over, not that your loved one is dead. All right, Julia writes, she tells me a bit how she had a very sweet time with her mother, and there was a lot of forgiveness work at the end. But then she writes, I told Mom I would miss her, and I told her if she had to go, I'd be okay, that we'd be okay, and I held her hand and I kissed her. Beautiful. She passed away an hour later. I didn't lie when I told her I loved her. I didn't lie when I told her I'd miss her, but I lied when I told her I'd be okay. I'm not okay. She was my mom. I sleep a lot. I'm quiet a lot. I'm not okay. How do I go on? First of all, you didn't lie to your mother. Saying I'm going to be okay means I am going to continue to live after you. And I am going to fully live after you. But saying I'm okay also means I'm going to fully grieve. So if you thought when you said to your mom, I'm going to be okay, meant I'll never cry, I'll never be down, that's not what okay looks like. Being okay after someone dies is grieving them. It is okay to grieve someone after they died. So you did not lie to her. So I would be very clear on that. And just be sweet to yourself. Just know that you have been through a lot. And don't make yourself a liar. You were reassuring your loving mom that she had done a good job and you'd be okay because she did so well in raising you. Don't turn yourself into a liar. Whitney asks, what are things I can say to myself when I can't get through tough days? I'm struggling so much with the loss of my father on some days I just can't function. So Whitney, on those tough days, you would say to yourself, this is hard, because we don't want to deny our feelings. This is hard, and I always say insert the word and I'm strong enough to handle these feelings of grief. I'm strong enough to be present for these feelings. So just know the struggle is what grief looks like. The struggle means you love them. The struggle means you cared about them. So it's okay to have those days that struggle. And be kind to yourself, reassure yourself that that's how you feel right now, but it's not how you'll feel tomorrow or the next day. All right, so those are the questions that came in ahead of time. Remember, I'm going to take any live questions we have now, and please know you can go to aboutgrief.com for even more answers on grief, but I think Paul has some questions that came in.
I do. Jennifer's cat passed away last week.
Jennifer's cat passed away last week. So she's in what I call early grief, yes.
And she was going to have her cremated and keep
She was
her
going to
ashes.
have her cremated, keep the ashes, yes.
But there was a mix-up at the vet, and the body was actually disposed of. And she just found out today.
Okay, so there was a mix-up at the vet. You want to go handle that, please?
Sure.
So there was a mix-up at the vet that is out of your control. And once again, you have to realize your cat is not in those ashes. Your cat is in your heart. I'd love to know your cat's name. Your cat lives on in you and in heaven is my belief. Your cat doesn't live on in the vet. Now, I understand it is disturbing to have a mix-up around your cat's ashes. And unfortunately, that even happens with human ashes sometimes. So just know in those situations, you want to really make sure you remember where your cat is. Because connect with her spirit, her heart. All right, Sharon says, my mom passed away in my arms while I was comforting her. I kept telling the nurse she was having a stroke and she said she wasn't. She then died of a stroke. I kept remembering the helplessness I felt of not being able to help. So one of the things you have to do is remember what's important for your mom is that you were there and you were caring and loving her. So you have to focus on that. And your mom was unfortunately going to die of something, and a stroke is what it was. And I believe if your mom died, that was going to happen whether or not the nurse did something. Because I'll tell you, if you have a stroke so close to death, it was usually, and you obviously need to talk to a physician about it, or the coroner possibly, but just know a lot of times the body breaks down with a number of things at once. So I'm sorry it happened that way, but your mom knew she loved you and you were there, and that's what's important. Another question, Paul?
So Mary's daughter passed away in April.
Mary's daughter passed away in April.
And she lived next door to her.
She lived next door.
So Mary found her on the floor already gone.
Mary found her on the floor already gone.
And now Mary can't get that image out of her head. And as her mother, she keeps thinking that she should have been able to save her.
Okay, so Mary can't get the image out of her head of discovering her daughter. It's so sad how those last images get stuck in our head. So what I want to, did she say how long ago it was?
It was in April.
So I want you to know when trauma occurs, think about it this way. When I meet, like Mary at one of my lectures, in my mind I have a file for people at my lectures, for people named Mary, for people who had a daughter who died, and it goes into files. We have these little files in our mind, just like a computer. When you find someone you love on the floor dead, your mind doesn't have a file to put it in. So it free floats around your mind early on. So it's not surprising that that would happen. So just know that happens. And Mary, what you can do as it becomes disturbing is you can do this. You can say, I'm beginning to see her on the floor, but that's not who she was. Let me see her on her 5th birthday. Let me see her on her 10th birthday. And you actively change the focus to another time. Okay, I hope that helps, Mary. Our thoughts and prayers are just with you. So sorry that happened that way. Another question?
So Sharon's mom passed in her arms.
Sharon's mom passed in her arms.
While she was comforting her.
While she was comforting her.
And Sharon kept telling the nurse that she was having a stroke.
I actually answered that one already,
You did?
Paul.
Okay.
I did, thank you.
All right.
Sharon, we got to revisit you again there.
So Joandra.
Okay.
Last year, she was 5 months pregnant.
Joandra last year was 5 months pregnant.
And her baby boy, Brandon, passed away because her body had pre-eclampsia.
Okay, so her baby boy passed away because of a complication.
And it's hard for her to forgive her body. She feels like it's her fault that the baby passed away.
Okay, it's her fault she feels like the baby passed away. So that it may be her body's fault. You did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong. I can tell you, I have worked with mothers for years. And I have sat with people who did everything right and their child still died. And I've also been with people who did everything wrong and their child lived. You have to realize there's a part of this that's out of our hands. And that was not your fault. Death doesn't happen because of something we did in those situations. So you really need to think about releasing that blame, because your mind gets to circle in it's my fault, it's my body's fault. And if your mind circles in that, you know what your mind doesn't do? Your mind doesn't grieve. So you have to say to yourself, all right, I've done the circular thinking. Let me drop down. Let me drop down and feel this pain. Let me drop down and feel the sadness of my baby dying. I hope that brings you some peace.
Bob's wife will have been, She passed away 2 years ago.
Bob's wife passed away 2 years ago.
And she still feels like it's yesterday.
Still feels like it's yesterday.
They were together for 30 years, and Bob found her passed away on their kitchen floor.
So Bob found her on the kitchen floor. Oh, Bob.
Every time that he's in there, which is quite often, he relives it.
Every time he's in there, he relives it. Okay?
His faith is very important for him right now.
His faith is important.
And without it, he didn't know if he could keep going. But he just is. He's struggling. It's hard for him.
So Bob, I'm going to give you practical advice for that. So if you have to walk into the kitchen and you see the spot where she died, here's the practical advice I would give you. I would take and I would put some of her pictures on that spot for a few days. And I would make that spot almost like a little remembrance spot for a few moments, for a few days. Then I would take those pictures and I would move them from the floor up to the cabinet, and I would put them on your kitchen cabinets, on your counter there. And I would move it up there, and I would do a ritual of going, honey, I'm taking the memory of you from the floor to the kitchen cabinet. And you'd put her right on the counter with those photos. Then I want you in time to take those photos and move them somewhere else, maybe back in the living room, and do the same thing, do a ritual. Honey, I'm moving you from the kitchen into the living room. And really do this ritual in your mind to move her from that place. The other thing you can do after you've done that, you can then also, when you go back to, oh, that's the spot, go, that's just one spot in the house. She's been in every spot of the house. But in fact, now she's in my heart. And begin to really think about, this is where she is. She is not on your floor. She is in your heart. I'm so sorry you had that experience, but know she lives on many, many other places. And I'm so glad you have your faith to help you with that. Yes.
Patricia lost her husband a year and a half ago.
Patricia lost her husband a year and a half ago.
She's very depressed and doesn't want to live.
She's very depressed and doesn't want to live.
She just wants to be with him.
She just wants to be with him.
She's tired of being depressed and crying 24/7 and just says this is too hard.
Okay, she's tired of crying all the time. So first of all, I have to say, if you are having, and I'll talk about this in a moment, suicidal thoughts, true suicidal thoughts, I would ask you call the suicide prevention hotline, and we'll stick that number in the comments. So I would ask that you make that call, because your life is very important. Even in your sadness, your life is very important. So please seek professional help. Now, one of the things that happens in grief is sometimes we have suicidal thoughts, but sometimes we have yearning. And the yearning can feel so bad that people can mistake our yearning for suicidal thoughts, and we feel like, I just want to be with them. And only you know which one you have. But if it's suicidal thoughts, please immediately get professional help. Now, if it turns out it is yearning, I would still say to you, please seek out a grief group. Please seek out a grief counselor. My site is grief.com. There's free grief groups there that I hope there's one in your area. There's a directory for free grief groups. Make sure you get support from Legacy. Make sure you see a counselor. I also have a directory of counselors who work with people in grief. Check with your church, check with your hospital, but please do get help. Now, in terms of the depression, we often talk about depression when really what we are is sad. So I would invite you to figure out, are you depressed or are you sad? Because sadness and even temporary depression are part of grief. Our loved ones aren't supposed to die without us being sad and a little depressed. So know that's very normal. So I hope you find some help there, and I really would encourage you to do something to interrupt those thoughts, whether it's a therapist, a group, I have retreats. There's many people who do different forms of help that you can get, so please look into some things to help you. By the way, if you're tuning in, we're doing questions. David Kessler here. And you can find me at grief.com. There's a free video on different methods that and information on healing grief at aboutgrief.com. I think we have a couple more questions, do we?
Yes.
Okay.
So Vivian's mom passed away.
Vivian's mom passed away.
And she has this image of her mom at the nursing home when she died 10 minutes earlier.
And she has an image of her mom at the nursing home. Okay.
And she looked like she was from Auschwitz with her mouth
Gotcha.
open. And she's trying to put another image from years earlier.
Right.
But she just is having a hard time understanding the heaviness that she feels.
How long ago did her mom die?
It didn't say.
Okay. So first of all, the heaviness you're feeling that your mom died is called grief. And so the first thing is we fight grief. So I would allow that heaviness to be and know that sometimes is what grief feels like. Oh, she says 1998. So Vivian, I would say if it's been that amount of time, you are not in early grief anymore. So I would say it would really behoove you to see a grief counselor or to really look into that. If you ever come to my retreats, if there's any one of those near you, some of the weekend retreats, we do work to help people lose those pictures that can be very old, and even people who have those pictures early in grief. But if it's 1998, you want to do some serious work to try to interrupt that because your mom would want you to continue to have a life. And she would want you to continue to have a life that doesn't keep her in the nursing home or you keep seeing a horrible image of her. That's not what your mom would want for you. Okay, so please do get help for 1998 because it is time for you to have a life that remembers her with more love than pain. Do you have another question?
Diane would like for you to talk a little bit about invisible losses. Her husband and her has been through multiple rounds of costly IVF.
Okay, so she's had multiple losses for IVF. So first of all, we call that ambiguous grief because it's grief that isn't seen by others. And no one but you and your husband are going to know the work you've been doing and the attachment and all those things when you're trying to have a baby, you're attaching to the thought. So you must recognize that as real grief. By the way, the other people in your life may not recognize it as real grief, but that's not your business. What they think grief is not your business. This is your journey and it's your loss. So it's for you to honor it. And I'm so sorry you've had so many losses while you're trying to create a life. So I hope that you will continue to keep going. And that may be adoption in other forms. It's not my place to know what your form of a child is, but I hope there is a child for you because it sounds like you have a lot of love to give. All right, I think we're about at our end here. I want to thank you all. These are such good questions. You can find me at grief.com. Please go to aboutgrief.com to get my free video. And just know there's help here for you on this site. And there's help for you in the Legacy groups and in my online classes and Facebook groups. So wherever you get help, if you're struggling, please do get help. And remember, we heal as a tribe, and coming together like this helps us realize we're not alone and we're here for one another. So I'm David Kessler. I really appreciate you tuning in, and thank you all for being here. And I'll see you again. We have some more of these planned very soon. Take care.